It's hard to figure out whether Australia's most progressive state, Victoria, is more like some sort of chapter from a George Orwell novel or a Monty Python sketch. It's hard to tell with some of the laws they come up with. In September, we saw anti-war protests in Melbourne outside an International Land Forces expo, which turned violent, with dozens of police, protesters and horses being injured. Anti-war protests turning violent? Who would have thunk it? In October, we saw thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters take to the streets across Australia on the eve of the October 7th anniversary, where Hamas terrorists attacked southern Israel, killing and maiming and abducting hundreds. In November, we saw Myer cancel the launch of their long-held Christmas windows display in response to a planned pro-Palestinian protest that didn't want Australians celebrating when other children across the world were suffering. And of course, just this month, we saw the arson attack of the Israel synagogue of Melbourne. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese eventually attended 4 days later, as he was met by hecklers who didn't take too kindly to him having the time to go off and play tennis while their religious buildings were burning. He didn't have too much to say except, "I did some exercise. That's what people do." To be fair, he did label it a terrorist attack. The fire here at the Israel synagogue in Melbourne was beyond despicable. It was terrorism. In response to this increase in religious extremism across the state, Premier Allan has introduced a raft of social cohesion laws. If you can't be cohesive, the government will make you be cohesive. As I asked earlier, is this a chapter from a George Orwell novel or a Monty Python sketch? You be the judge. Ms. Allan tweeted, "This isn't about the Middle East. This is about Victoria. This is about our values and the right of anyone in the state to live, work and pray freely without fear or intimidation, anti-Semitism, racism or hate." She then posts a summary of the new laws, banning flags and symbols of listed terrorist organisations including Hamas and Hezbollah, white nationalists and more. It sounds good on paper, but I don't like that "and more" part. Who gets to decide what is and isn't banned? I'm not saying it's not well-intentioned, but is it not open to abuse? Banning the use of masks at protests, which are used by agitators to shield identities and hide from personal accountability. Isn't it odd? Just a few years ago, if you weren't wearing a mask at a protest, you'd be hit on the head with a police baton and arrested. Now the opposite is true. Wear a mask and you'll be hit on the head with a police baton and arrested. Minister for Police Anthony Carbines commented on this new law. "Ski masks are for Mount Buller in the ski seasons. They are not for streets in Melbourne. If you stand for something, you don't get to hide behind a mask here in Victoria. If a protester refuses to remove their face coverings, they can be arrested and charged." Of course, not everyone is happy with this law. Wait, now you'll be charged if you do wear a face mask? This government is a complete joke. And so how can Victorians who wish to avoid infection from the ongoing COVID pandemic live freely and legally protest if they choose when you are banning their main remaining COVID protection? Continuing, banning the use of glue, rope, chains, locks and other devices. Of course, climate protesters and the like who glue themselves to the road aren't too happy with this new law, with The Guardian reporting, "No glue, chains or locks. Victoria's anti-Semitism crackdown a smokescreen to target climate protesters." Introducing a social cohesion pledge for organisations who apply to receive funding from the state government. I don't know what this pledge will be, but it seems like it could easily be open to abuse. For example, would openly criticising the government be seen as breaking social cohesion? This could easily become a very dystopian law. The laws will also make it illegal to protest in certain exclusion zones around places of worship. How these zones will be determined and their size is anybody's guess. Of course, the Australian Palestine Advocacy Network have blasted these new laws, according to The Australian, with them releasing a statement saying, The Victorian government's announcement of measures to curtail and criminalise protest is a dangerous attack on civil liberties, aimed at suppressing legitimate public political action by Palestinians and their supporters demanding an end to Israel's 15-month-long genocide in Gaza. The Premier's comments also stoke division and misrepresent the diversity of people, including members of the Jewish community, who stand in solidarity with Palestinians and demand an end to Israel's genocide. Premier Allan's rhetoric is not about safety or order, it is about suppressing community members' democratic rights and the growing movement for life, liberation and justice. Look, obviously something needs to be done, but are these laws the answer? Does the task of social cohesion even belong to the government? Is it even possible to force social cohesion on the population? It sounds somewhat Machiavellian to me. Anyway, as always, the Victorian government are willing to give it a shot and test the limits of the Victorian public. I hope this ends well.